So for several weeks, we've been walking alongside Jesus as he has emerged in the public ministry. He is most certainly in the center of his public ministry as we approach today's passage. He started off by announcing his mission, his purpose in life. He began calling co-workers, began meeting the needs of the people that came to him and teaching his lessons. He's encountered mild opposition and growing suspicion, people who will soon be conspiring against him. And yet he continues, most of all, to be training those people who are closest to him, those he calls his disciples. We experience more of his lesson in today's passage, and I'll be inviting you to read aloud those words in white print as I read the ones in yellow. But what about you, Jesus asked. Who do you say I am? Peter answered, God's Messiah. Jesus strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone.
And he said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. And he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life.
Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me.
For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it.
What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Don't you hate it when he asks the hard questions? It's one of my favorite sports-related stories, which is why some of you have already heard it. It's an event that has been named by sports writers Malice in the Palace. Occurred just about 14 years ago in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, where the Detroit Pistons were hosting the Indiana Pacers in what has now become a very memorable basketball game. The two teams were bitter, passionate rivals, particularly in those days, and so you always expected a little something extra. The extra that night came with about 49 seconds left to go in the game. The Pacers had a 15-point lead on the Pistons' home court. A lot of people were upset and disappointed about that. But when a Pistons player went for what should have been an easy layup, 49 seconds to go, one of the Pacer players fouled him in the attempt, rather roughly. As it turned out, the Piston player wasn't very happy about being fouled when the game was essentially over. And he made his unhappiness known. There was some pushing and shoving, a little bit of what they called a brawl. And eventually, when the teams were all settled down and back in their places, the Indiana Pacer player who had committed the foul was laying on the bench there by the rest of the team, when one of the Detroit fans from a few aisles up decided to throw half a cup of beer on him. He did not like that either. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have liked it myself. He goes into the stands, along with some of his other players. Some of the fans, apparently pretty well inebriated by this stage in the game, responded. The malice in the palace resulted in 9 basketball players being suspended for some period of time that impacted the Pacers for at least 2 seasons. 5 of those players also received criminal charges and had to serve community service. 5 fans, if you want to call them that, also were brought up on charges and were banned for life from attending Piston home games. It seems that when you look at that scenario, called by some of the worst night in NBA history, you can carve out different attitudes, different kinds of people. You start off with the players, the teams, not just the guys on the court, but everyone who really supports them, the coaches, the substitutes, the trainers, the die-hard fans who are really powerfully supportive. You've got that group of people. You've got the fans, slightly invested, but really just there to be entertained. And then you have the people who throw beer. People who are so intent on being entertained that if it doesn't happen exactly the way they want it, they throw a fit. If I don't get exactly what I want, I have permission to throw a fit. There's another group involved in this story that would entail everybody on the planet who really doesn't care at all about basketball or these stories that some of us keep telling. In the days of Jesus, there were certainly some people who didn't know he was alive and who could have cared less. He had become fairly prominent, but certainly wasn't as if he was on nightly television. He wasn't necessarily a household name, and some people were very happy to be totally indifferent and ignorant about it. He certainly did have that group of people who were throwing things at him, insults, plots, trying to undermine anything, trying to separate and divide his followers. Some of them probably because they believed something radically different than what he was teaching, and they were just arguing to make their point. And some of them, most likely, people who had sort of followed him, but became disillusioned when they didn't get exactly what they wanted. Maybe he didn't do for them what they asked. Maybe they were expecting him to be this great militant leader who would restore the country, who would drive out the Romans and be the Messiah that they'd imagined. Maybe, they thought he was here to make Israel great again. And disillusioned, they began throwing things at him. There certainly was that group of fans, relatively uncommitted, kind of enjoyed the energy, the novelty, the distraction, found something pleasant. And then there was his team, the disciples and several other followers who were putting it on the line on a regular basis, who were trying to learn, trying to do as they were told, learning how to face the opposition, learning how to answer the questions, learning how to be his disciples. Part of the difficulty with the malice in the palace is that when you ask which one of these people, these groups that we mentioned, really understood the spirit of competitive basketball, it's hard to find anybody who really got it. Certainly not the ones who throw things, certainly not the ones who are just there for the show. And as it turns out, a good number of the actual teammates lost perspective and forgot why they were there. Forgot the purpose of their gathering. It seems to me in today's passage when Jesus is talking to that inner circle, that ultimate group, the teammates, that he's asking, do you understand what we're about? Do you know who I am? Do you know what it will mean for you to follow me? He'll explain. Contrary to what you may have imagined, this is not going to turn out all that really well for me. I'm not going to rise to great social prominence or great military power. I'm not even going to rise to be the leader of the temple and the contemporary religious organization. Instead, they're going to reject me. Instead, the powers that be are going to exert power over me. I'll be arrested, I'll be beaten, I'll be killed. And certainly, if I'm going to give my life for this cause, it would be comforting to know that my closest followers get it. We can relate to that, right? We can understand why it would be important to him for them to know who he was, for them to know what he was about, for them to understand the spirit of his mission, so that after he's given his life for that mission, they will be able to follow. They won't get distracted. They won't be disillusioned entirely. They won't wander off into various tangents and confused directions. If I'm going to give my life for this cause, I need to know that somebody will pick up the cross and carry it beyond me. An important lesson for those first followers, an important lesson for them to pass on to their successors, an important lesson for us to continue to consider 2,000 years later. Because it seems like the church is often just as confused today about what it means to be church as those first disciples still trying to figure it out. There are too many competing interests, too many confusing distractions, too much mixing with the values of the culture. Too tempting to think that the purpose of a church is to have the biggest building, the largest treasury, the greatest number in attendance, all of which might be wonderful blessings, if they get it, if they understand the mission, if in being faithful, they are faithful to Jesus, to who he was, to what he believed, to the spirit he embodied. He started off with a dozen and a group of others who always seemed to go unnoticed and unnamed, surrounding them, providing for him, inspiring and comforting him, and helping him achieve his purposes. Perhaps the 20 to 30 of us today, all gathered here, remembering the one who gave his life for the cause, and asking ourselves, did we get it? Do we still understand it? Is who he was still the heart of the matter? And I think God is pleased that we even bother to ask the question, that we have enough sense about us, enough faith about us, enough integrity among us to look for answers, enough heart within us to care what the answer might be. Who do we say that he is? Not the superstar celebrity, not the person seeking power and dominance and wealth, not the one who's leading some great military revolution to change the world, but apparently someone who believes, as he believes in himself and his mission, that one life can make a difference. Your life can make a difference. Apparently someone who believes that teaching and passing along the right questions can shape a society and change the world. That the way we express our answers and live out our faith, any one of us among the 7 billion on the planet, every action, every decision, every expression, every witness matters and can change the world. Someone who seemed to believe that forgiveness was more powerful than dominance and grudges and hatred. Someone who believed that the nature of the universe is intended to bind all living people through a spirit of love. In a world that still seems to think that love is a soft, wimpy approach to life. People who still don't get it. That the love Jesus taught, the love he expressed, the love he inspires is indeed the most powerful force in the universe. Not an easy thing to embody. Certainly not an easy promise to fulfill. And yet we have been privileged to have heard about it and to have seen it and to have experienced it and to have expressed it. And in the best moments of our lives, we got it. And we carried it. And we fulfilled that mission. In those best moments of our lives as individuals, as families, as congregation, we have lived up to the promise of Jesus Christ. I apparently can't say that without smiling. To think that in our best moments we have lived up to the promise of Jesus Christ. I don't know what it takes to make you feel good, but that makes me feel very good. Grateful for those best moments, hoping for more of them, and believing they are sure to come. Because when you get down to the heart of the matter, there is something within us that inspires all of us to embody the Spirit of Christ. Let us pray. And so we are grateful, O God, that you have been so generous as to continue teaching us, though sometimes we are so very slow to learn. That you continue to have faith in our abilities and our gifts, though we so often don't get it at all and fall very short of our potential. That your passion for forgiveness allows us to try again with even more commitment, even more confidence. And that we have known moments when it has been obvious that you have been at work through us. For what we have accomplished, we could not have done on our own. And so, oh God, continue to teach us, to help us experience more of those best moments, to accept your forgiveness and to forgive ourselves for those worst moments. We continue learning and inspiring, encouraging each other as we seek only to pick up our cross daily and follow you. In Jesus' name, amen.